Electric Cafe.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Electric Cafe. Today's album review is on Urban Meditation's fifth album called The No Dreamer. And I'm excited to get a chance to listen to it for the first time today. Also, and review it here for you today and show you some samples of each track as we go through the album. I'm really excited to do that with you today. I'm a big fan of Urban Meditation's music, and I'm really excited again to check it out for the first time. If you have a request that you'd like me to review something electronic music related, my email is down below. Feel free to email me and we can talk about reviewing that release. So, Urban Meditation is an artist by the name of Charles Urban who records out of St. Louis, Missouri. I first got a chance to check out his music in 2018 with his first release, which I have a copy of right here. It was called 20 Years in Space. At the time, I was following Carpasonum Records very closely since the label's inception in 2013, and I feel kind of tied with it because not only my background with Fax Records, but also um, the important newer artists that I've met through this. One of them being Urban Meditation. When I got a chance to buy this album in 2018, and I'm surrounded by his all four albums that Charles did in the next coming years, and just been a fan of his music, and thankfully I we got a chance to be acquaintances on Facebook, and we talk occasionally, and it's really interesting. I practice making sure my memory of my music finds and my music collection and tracks, and it's you almost become like a librarian in a way, and that's kind of how I treat my music, the way I store it and the way I show it and the way I try to remember it and things like that. And I'm usually always really good about knowing where I first heard an artist or where I first heard a release or a song or where I was out in a club and heard this track. And I'm usually really good about that because I like to keep my memory sharp when it comes to how I found music and where I heard it and where I first was. And one thing I guess it's probably sort of a evolution, but I can't really pinpoint it to any one particular thing. But it's my love of space music and ambient music, and it's funny because it's not something I can pinpoint where somebody gave me my first ambient CD and was like, bam. It's kind of like an evolution of just background music and growing up through sci-fi music. I mean, sci-fi movies. Um, background music, science fiction. Uh, you know, science fiction programs, maybe. Some are educationals. Some documentaries. Probably when I was a kid. Or but one thing I do remember was the music that was played in the background of the ride at Disneyland called the Space Mountain. I grew up in suburb of Los Angeles, and we often went to Disneyland as kids. I mean, Disneyland and Magic Mountain and Knott's Berry Farm were three amazing parks that we had within about an hour and a half of where we used to live. And, we used to go to Disneyland at least once a year. And my favorite ride growing up through the early 80s and mid 80s was Space Mountain. But in the early 80s, and you can look up it online and also on YouTube, there's some samples of the music that they used to play in the as you waited to get on the ride, and it was kind of it was really impactful. I can remember as a kid, and I still can remember it now. Probably being like 7 or 8 or 9 years old, and just loving the ambiance of being on a sort of a fake spaceship, and it looked real. I mean, it was huge. If you guys remember uh, the waiting to get on the ride of Space Mountain, it was just huge. It felt like you were on like a docking station, and you were about to be shuttled into space by this ride, and it was just an amazing background. But the music was so it had like you know like sort of sound effects in it, like meteors flying by, and there'd be like conversations of workers that were sort of working on the the modules and stuff like that, and sort of the space station. They would sort of talk to each other, and it had this kind of like eerie music in the background. It was just so sci-fi and so cool, and that just blew me away. And I can still remember that like it was yesterday. And it was just things like that that over the years um, just made me really interested in finding space music and ambient music. And then in the later '80s, I found Tangerine Dream and Brian Eno and a lot of great German space music, and all the way through the early '90s with Fax Records, and then on to people that are kind of carrying on that tradition. And one of those persons that's really carrying on the tradition really well is urban meditation. All right, so that was the first track called Activation. I love openers for ambient albums. Short little interludes that kind of set the tone and sort of, in a way, it's almost like a forward to a mystery novel or to a book or even like a table of contents. It kind of gives you a short, I wouldn't say a roadmap, but it sort of brings you into the universe, right? It kind of drops you into the world of whatever the producer is going to lay out, and so you just immediately get thrown into this sci-fi kind of area. Obviously, it sounds like it's activating some sort of time travel machine or some kind of spaceship or something like that. It's certainly an activation, like the title is called. But something dramatic's going to happen. It's not like it's a powerful activation. It's almost got like multiple things that are starting up. It's like a mechanical feel. It sounds like space crystals or some sort of like. There's also some other kind of unnatural or something else that's sort of starting as well. It's not only mechanical, but it's also something else. And what these kind of tracks do is it just kind of sets your imagination on fire when you get into a track like this, and a producer just sets the tone with this kind of intro that really kind of brings you into their atmosphere. And I always loved intros for this reason, because you have a couple minutes to really kind of give a snapshot of what's going to come up. And I think it's such an important part of making an ambient album is making a great intro to kind of almost take away any kind of pre-notions or preconceived notions that you have of what this album is going to be. Obviously, if you know the producer, it's probably going to be a spacey ambient album. If you know the label, it's going to be something ambient related. You can read the titles, you can read you can see the pictures, right? You can get an idea of what's going to come, but you can even read the title of the track and have an idea of what's going to happen. But you're still not fully ready for what it's going to do, and so you still obviously have to hear it. And then you hear something like this, and it just kind of sparks your imagination and really has you interested in where the rest of the album is. And that's the best you can do for, I mean, that's the most you can hope to do as a producer. I think making an intro is harnessing all that and taking all that into account and giving that anticipation, that pre sort of background of the story, and that start is so important. And it also gives you it gives you an opportunity, I would imagine, as a producer to really kind of become a little bit experimental and do some different sounds. And sure enough, here I love the balance of that sort of mechanical feel, that sort of generator feel starting up. It sounds like there's something a little deeper in there, like I was saying, like a space crystals, or maybe there's something else that's sort of powering this machine. It's not just mechanical, but it needs to start up by some other fuel, and not just an engine, like a mechanical engine. It's some sort of like uh, some other unnatural sort of power that's helping this uh, generator sort of machine or spaceship or whatever it is sort of activate. And so you gotta love it for what it does. Is it really successful in doing all those things? And I think it's an excellent opener. I give it 8 out of 10 stars with that. All right, so that was the second track called Immersion. So far, the titles of the tracks are spot on. This definitely immerses you in sort of a time travel feel, or you're sort of beginning some sort of deep space traveling. I didn't expect to hear a rhythm and a beat, a techno beat, so soon in the album, but I think that's great because I do feel like there's an opportunity with a lot of space producers who make ambient music and space music to put a little bit more techno in it, and also more rhythm. So I'm excited to hear that in this second track already. There's certainly some sort of swirling background chords that are going on that give it a nice atmosphere, and still, even though there's a beat in there, you kind of think, oh well, it's kind of more techno. Well, it still has a very reserved feel, and the rhythm and the beat is definitely more in the background, and it just progresses nicely and has a nice flow to it and evolution to the beat where it's still in the background and it's still moving things along and it has a good tempo to it, but it still feels like background. So it's giving it a nice atmosphere and a nice anticipation. Again, it's really building the story well, but there's definitely an ominous feel of like if it being a more a dramatic event that we're going to or somewhere we're going to that's not necessarily peaceful, and maybe it's more of a different kind of mission or something like that. But it does feel like it's a little dramatic, but it's still building the story here, and I really like that too because again, when you think of like something with a beat or something that's spacey, you figure it's pretty full on techno, but here it's still nicely reserved and still kind of building that story and that anticipation of the next part of the story. I'm assuming these tracks flow together. I'm listening to the files that the artist actually sent me, so I'm not sure if they're segued together. It looks like this track does end, but I'm not sure if the tracks flow together. I'll probably hear that as we go. I wasn't sure if the first track sort of flowed into the second one a little bit, but the second track seems like it's pretty much by itself. But so I just wanted to mention that I'm not sure if it actually is a segued album or if the tracks are individual at this point right now. But yeah, I really like this track. I give it a 7.5. I think it's right in between very good and excellent. It's I really like the pace of this album so far. So let's go on to track number 3. All right, so that was track number 3 called Integration. I wasn't expecting that much techno in this album. It's kind of surprising, but it's cool. I dig it. There's a at first I was just for about like 10 seconds. I felt like the original first beat was maybe a little bit too organic for a spacey album. But then as you heard all the other sounds around it that sort of have like a spacey effects to it and sort of a little bit glitchy and it's a little bit disorientating also. Everything has like sort of a warble to the rhythm to it, and it almost reminds me of the movie Black Hole. If you ever seen the movie Black Hole from the late '70s, there's a point where the nuclear generators sort of turn on and the spaceship engines sort of come on. Like that's what kind of this warble kind of sounds like in this track. It sounds like it's almost like a nuclear radiation sort of happening or building or sort of generating a pulse for the rhythm of the track. It's really interesting. The drumming is really kind of builds the tension too as the track flows on. And then towards I really like it the last like 30 seconds. That sort of warbly sound. You can sort of hear like a vocal in there for a second or a little bit of distortion there and it becomes glitchy. It's really cool how the entire track, for the most part, the rhythm has these certain sounds on it that sound almost imperfect. Like they're sort of being put through a generator that's just sort of overloading because the sounds are sort of distorting and warbling and it just sounds like something's pulsating or something's. It almost sounds like a spaceship is sort of moving, but it's on the brink of being overrun or overtaxed, or it's barely making through the time warp or through the black hole or something like that. It's almost like an imperfect machine or a spaceship is trying to make it through. It's really interesting because I like the imperfections on this track where it sounds like it's not perfect. And through the effects, it's really cool how it does that. I do wish there was a little bit more going on in the track. It is more of a track that I feel like, wow, you could put this on a vinyl, like on a 12 inch, and this would be a really big club kind of techno track in a way. It almost kind of reminds me of like Spastic by Richie Houghton in a way with the drums and the powerfulness of the track. It almost feels like it could be a peak time techno record for the headstrong, for people that really like deep techno, because it's got all that, and I'm sure this would sound amazing on a great sound system. But I do feel like I do feel like I wish there was a little bit of melody in there somewhere. I'm not, the trance kind of the trancey sounds. I get it. I'm not necessarily a huge fan of the trancey sounds in there, but it's just a touch of them, which is nice. And so it does it. So it keeps it more techno. It just kind of shows itself here and there. But I still think it's a very good track for sure. I just wish there was a little bit more melody to take it into the eight or excellent range for me. But it's really good, really well produced, and I'm sure if I heard this on like a big sound system, I'd probably rate it even higher. But I give it 7 out of 10 stars. But I think it's very good. And again, it's kind of a grower because I do feel like if you come back to it more and see the flow of this album, which I'm really interested to hear how the flow of the album is gonna come down or even build higher from that. I'm not sure how it could build even higher than that unless it was full on techno, but I'm interested to see how this track sort of flows. I would think maybe this track would maybe be in the middle of the album versus a little bit closer to the front, because it's a very powerful track. So I'm interested to see how the album's going to flow from this. But again, it's kind of a song that would grow on me, and then again, I would probably rate it even higher if I heard it out. It's definitely a very powerful track, and I'm probably not doing it quite justice playing it on my medium-sized speakers. I should probably take this CD and or this track into my main room and play it on my biggest speakers. But it's a little earlier here in the morning. I don't want to wake up the neighbors. Really cool track. I give it 7 out of 10 stars. Let's go on to track number 4. All right, so that was track number 4 called Imposition. This track I give it a 7.25 stars. I like this one a little bit more than the last one, but it's very close in a different way. I like this one. I like the sort of anticipation that this one builds. It's funny that I mentioned Space Mountain and the sounds that are going in the background of this track is it reminds me of the of that ride. It almost sounds like there's sort of like meteors and like almost like objects sort of moving through space. Like you can sort of hear like the wind of sort of something like going by, like a meteor or something, like in the background. And then you just have that keyboard, the main keyboard tone, just it washes over, but it's very eerie and very sci-fi at the same time, and really kind of ominous, and it gives this track sort of a I wouldn't say a scary feel, but it definitely feels like there's something might happen at any particular moment. And so I like how this track really builds that kind of story of the sci-fi. I really like the minimal beat too. It's very it doesn't evolve too much, but it does its job, and it keeps the anticipation strong, and it's almost like it almost in a way it almost kind of it makes the trek longer, if you know what I mean. Like it kind of builds the anticipation really well. And for those reasons, I like it a little bit more than the last one. Although I do like the production on the integration a lot, and I do feel like I want to rate that one a little higher now that I sort of compare it to this one. Maybe I should have both 7.25 stars. In fact, I'll probably change that to that. I might as well change that to 7.25 stars for both of these. And let's go on to track number 5. All right, so that was track number 5 called Recollection. This is the longest track on the album, it looks like. This one's a little bit over 10 minutes. From what I can tell from the files coming up, the not the length of them, but the file size, this seems to be the longest track. This I love the old school toms. It sounds kind of like an old school Roland, or maybe it's a newer Roland. But I love the old school tom sound, the deep bass, the heavy chords. The filtering on the chords is really catchy as it sort of becomes more atmospheric. And around 6 minutes and 10 seconds, the sort of melodies ring out of the chords, and it really becomes more euphoric and floaty, and really to the point where it becomes beautiful. There's an excellent balance of spacey ambience and techno in this track. I can see why this is probably the peak of the album, maybe at track number 5. I can see now why integration is probably third. This one is even more powerful in a way. Even though it's not as maybe as serious as integration, it's more euphoric. It feels like it's kind of come. It's kind of sort of at the peak of the adventure in a way. Where if you kind of for the first time in the album you get a little bit of euphoric feeling of, or maybe safe feeling, or it's finally you're able to sort of breathe and enjoy wherever you've gone, which I find really nice because there was so much tension building. It's nice that this track kind of alleviates a little bit of that tension, and you can finally relax and enjoy the view in a way. I really love the balance of techno and spacey ambience in this track, especially with the chords as well. It kind of floats into like a little bit of a dub techno as well, which is right in my wheelhouse. And this is my favorite track so far. I give it 8.25 stars. Definitely think it's an excellent track, and I really like how this is kind of becoming the maybe this track is sort of the peak of the album in a way. You kind of feel like you've finally kind of gotten to the point where you've been trying to get to, where maybe it's the mission. Uh, Maybe it's the objective of the mission, or where you're sort of getting a feel of over the tension of the trip, and sort of you're kind of getting to where you can kind of enjoy, or at least you know not be so tense in the flow of the emotions and everything like that. For a while there, it was so tense and spacey. You really couldn't enjoy the sort of spacey atmosphere. But I like that. I mean, that's the point of building a story, right? I mean, there was a lot of tension, and now there's a release, and so now it's going to be interesting to see how this album sort of comes down from that, or maybe continues it and sort of then rounds out to be the end of the album. So let's go on to track number 6. track number 6 called Propagation. Uh, this is this is my favorite beat so far. My favorite techno beat. It's almost subliminal in a way. The build of the track, everything is building really nicely as far as the rhythm, but the beat is still a little bit reserved. And I like that kind of old school approach. It's not so much on the forefront of techno as far as like it being more aggressive. It's still kind of laid back in some ways. I mentioned it a little bit on the last track, but I love the kind of old school building of these rhythms and some of the sounds in the rhythms, like the claps in here, are definitely old school. Almost gives it kind of a Detroit techno feel. Um, the changes midway through is very brave. There's a progression going on, and then there's a quick evolution. I can't quite describe that one particular sound, but when the twinkling melody also starts, it's sort of the track sort of adjusts and morphs into another part of the track, and everything really comes together really well there. It's nice and spacey and really nice flow, and the sounds really balance really well off each other. Like you have the chords and that one particular sound, the twinkling melody, the deep beat, the rhythm. Everything is really nice and concise here, and it's a nice flow through the track. I like this one a little bit more than integration or imposition as far as the more techno tracks. Um, and it comes off really nicely after recollection. Like these two, sort of in the middle here, are sort of like the. So far, I'm thinking sort of like the come down of the peak of the album, and I give this track 7.5 stars. Really nice track, right in between very good and excellent. Really well programmed stuff, and I could definitely see like in a big like club atmosphere or a big sound system, this would sound fantastic. Let's go on to track number 7. So that was track number 7 called "The Simulation." The last track was my favorite beat so far, and I spoke too soon because I even like this beat even better. It's a bit ravey, and I like that too, but it's still on the lower BPM side. I love the rave clap. I'm always a huge fan of the rave clap. I just love it. It's always a great addition to an old school kind of groove. But this groove is fantastic. I love the deepness in the groove. The chord work is really impressive as well. There's sort of an evolution of the chords, and I really like when an artist evolves the chords so much, or really evolves any sound to where a different sound sort of comes out of it. And that's what I feel like. There's a kind of an optimum. I should have wrote down the exact time when it sort of changed, but there's a different sort of tone or a different sort of sound evolving that becomes the focus somewhere around like two thirds of the track. I should have wrote that down, but I really like that. And but the groove is. I love the balance of the deeper groove. It's somewhat angry. It's definitely got a serious seriousness to it, but also the chords are still loose feeling as well. And so you have a great dynamic of a darker, slower but still gritty. It's very meaty groove, but then you have these like floaty chords over the top. It's just a great balance. In my opinion, this is probably the most complete techno track on here. I still like Recollection. That's still my favorite, but this is my second favorite as far as not counting the intro. This is my second favorite track so far, and probably the most complete techno track. I feel like I just like I like the floatiness and the more beautiful sounds of Recollection the best. But as far as like in the middle, a combination of darker and sort of um, a balanced track, I like the Stimulation the best. So I give it 7 3/4, right under excellence, right there for me. And let's go on to track number 8. Alright, that was track number 8 called Fragmentation. I love the deep kick drum on this track. Sounds like an 808 for sure on this. There's a touch of IDM in here, but it's still deeper techno. It sounds a little bit alien like, but also otherworldly. Love the old school keys. It's kind of reminds me of my man Edgar Froese in a way. Um, it definitely has a kind of an old school kind of new age feel to the keyboards. The kind of they're almost primitive in a way, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in kind of a old fashioned, vintage kind of new age melody, where it's kind of a little bit meandering, but it's not really totally. I guess totally focused. It does have a little bit of meandering to it, or just sort of a spacey, not sure which direction it's go, but it just becomes kind of floaty. And again, it's sort of in a new age way, and I mean that in a good way. But this is a really nice addition. It's nice to hear a song that's a little bit less serious, but then the beat is still serious. Like it's still a deep bass line, deep kick on the percussion, the rhythm. it's still kind of serious, but everything else on top is very melodic and sort of gives off a feeling of like wonderment. And in my opinion, this is probably although the beats have kind of hinted at some early 90s techno for sure in here. Definitely a touch of rave in here too at certain points, and I mean that very lightly, but like in the last track, I feel like it has a touch of rave in there, post rave sound, but this is probably the most 90s sounding, and definitely gives me this sort of the chill out vibes of ambient techno from the period of the middle and early 90s. Definitely kind of gives me that like almost like a biosphere type Beyond Records sort of balance of like that, and maybe I mean it does kind of give me that microgravity feel of like biosphere. It almost a slight sci-fi in there, but also a very otherworldly alien planet kind of feel to where it's a balance of wonderment and sort of uh, rhythmic techno. It's just a really great balance, and I really like the chill out feel of this track. I do wish this song kind of went on a little bit longer. Most of the other tracks were at least 7, 8, 9, and even 10 minutes, and this one's just over 6. I do kind of feel like I would like this one to go on a little bit longer because it's probably my favorite of the more techno ones. But this one's probably tied for my second favorite. I got a 7 3/4 stars. I really like this track. And but I can see why it's a shorter track. Like we're sort of evolving to the end of the CD, and I would imagine the CD is going to start wrapping up because it's getting probably like in the 60 65 minute range right now. So we're getting close to probably having to wrap it up for the time purposes of a CD length around 75 80 minutes, I would imagine. But yeah, I really like this track. Definitely strong chill out vibes on this track. Let's go on to track number 9 and let's see how this CD rounds out with the last two. Track number 9 called Reformation. This is certainly goes really well after the last track. It seems like both these last two tracks are sort of coming down in a way. Definitely both these have like more of an ambient techno feel and definitely a 90s feel. This track almost at the beginning, the first like 2 or 3 minutes, the beat almost it's a little bit more techy. It almost sort of leans into a little bit of an electro. There's a little bit of a snap on the snare, and it's definitely a little bit more techy, but still very floaty with the melody and everything. I do feel like the percussion of the snap of the percussion um, is a little bit crunchy. It does hurt the ears a little bit when I put on my headphones to see if to second to kind of give a second opinion on where I felt the I wouldn't say the mastering, but the I was trying to kind of gauge the loudness, and so I put on some headset, and it is a little bit crunchy, a little bit loud in the higher percussion sort of. It's kind of a very crisp sounding, and it hurts your ears just a touch if you play it at really loud volumes, But where I didn't quite get that with a lot of the other tracks. I do also feel like this track. I kind of wish there was a little bit more of a melody like coming out of this track, and maybe another level to the melody, maybe another part of the melody sort of come out. But I really do like how it builds and how it finishes out, and sort of it almost kind of I wouldn't say lulls you to an ending, but it kind of is a little again sort of a meandering um, minimal kind of ride out, which is nice sounding. It's cool. I just wish there was a little bit more of an additional melody on top of it or beneath it to really kind of bring the track home a little bit more. But still another very good track. I give it 7.25 stars. And then let's go on to the last track. All right, so that was the last track, track number 10 called Disillusion. And this is kind of a little bit over 4 minutes, kind of the outro of the album, I would imagine. This is what I really like about intros and outros and what they can be and how they sort of can bookend a nice story, especially in like more ambient music like this and space music, kind of a theme and a great way to sort of end and start a story. This is really cool, and it's a very visual track as well. It sounds like you're shutting down the operation or you're shutting down the program, right? It's got that sort of winding down sound, and then you sort of hear like sounds around you. It almost sounds like you're in a science lab or in a hospital lab, and you can hear some sort of clerical sounds and some talking. It sort of sounds like some people. You're definitely in a workspace. It sounds like sort of like a hospital or again like a science lab, and you're sort of waking up and you're wondering if it's like a dream, and it brings in that sort of human element to the story, and you're not sure if that was a dream or not. Was the program like an AI program, and you're sort of waking up in the science lab, and they just kind of unplugged it, and you're back in your reality. But then there's this eerie melody that comes in around like 45, 50 seconds, and it's like it's very dreamlike, and then you're like, no, it wasn't a dream, it was real. And so it's just a fantastic visual to it. It's just a great ending, and you're feeling like you think it was a dream, but it wasn't a dream, and now you're confident it was a dream because you're now remembering it, even though it was a program. So you're wondering if it's real or not. It's fantastic. That's a great way to end the album. That's what I got from the track, anyways. Just fantastic visual. Um, as far as an outro or an intro, I give it 9 out of 10 stars. I think it's amazing. All right, so that was the No Dreamer by Urban Meditation. My overall thoughts on the album, really, really good album. I really enjoyed it. Nice balance of ambient and techno, spacey music with a rhythm. A lot more techno in here than I thought was going to be in here, and so I was pleasantly surprised by a lot of good, strong techno beats in here and grooves. Nothing is overly aggressive. Everything is nice and tight and kind of on the subliminal side. I like when techno becomes sort of like uh, a pacekeeper and not so much the overall dominant thing and driving the tracks. Like I really feel like everything else is driving the tracks, and the rhythms are secondary, even though they're still pretty prevalent. And so I like the balance of it was still being more spacey than more techno. But I really enjoyed this album overall. I think it's very well produced. You definitely get your money's worth. I think it's pushing almost 75, 80 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. So definitely a lot of great music in here, and a very consistent album too. I found every track above very good, which is pretty unusual. Sometimes I think some tracks are pretty good or good, but all the tracks on here I felt were very good. And nothing is like overly perfect, which I like too. There's a lot of human element into this album, which I really feel is important when you're making a sort of sci-fi album. Is you got to have that human feel, and with the great intros and the outro too. Like it's really a nice compact story, and again, really surprised that it's more techno than I thought it would be. But again, it's still more spacey than it is more techno, and so I love the balance of all that he's done with the productions, the tracks, just the overall aesthetic of the song of the album, cohesiveness of it, nice flow through it, really strong stuff, and I really like the artwork as well. So just really pleased in every way on this album. Really think it's worth checking out. I give the album a 77 out of 100. On the high side of very good. No track was below a 7 here. Really consistent, very good album. Definitely pushing excellent, right up close to it. I'll definitely put the links down below so you can check out more of Urban Meditation's music if you're interested. I'll put the Bandcamp down below, and also where you could purchase this CD if you like, and or the digital music. He also has another album coming out with Paul Darlington as under the name of Apollo North, and that album's called Crossing Atlantic. Also put the link down below. That album's coming out as well. So definitely check out some of his latest work if you like what you're hearing here. I'm sure Crossing Atlantic is really, really strong as well. But yeah, I thank Charles for sending this to me, and really appreciate him trusting me and giving an honest review of it. So I appreciate that, and knowing his music, it's always great to anticipate a new release by an artist that I follow and enjoy a lot. So appreciate your time and listening, and thank you for the support on the channel. And yeah, 77 out of 100 for The Nobe Dreamer by Urban Meditation. All right, thanks so much.
Electric Cafe.